Hey there. Today we're going to talk about cancer as a metabolic disease. And hopefully, this episode won't get flagged or taken off my YouTube channel because anytime you go against the grain of cancer and challenge the narrative that is out there right now, which is cancer is a genetic disease and it just happens, a lot of times your content gets taken down. This has happened to me already, but I want to talk about cancer as a metabolic disease today. I've had a few experts on in the past that you can refer back to. Dr. Thomas Seyfried, he's one of my all-time favorites in cancer research, in cancer as a metabolic disease. And actually, he's written a book called that. And I've also interviewed Dr. Martin Moore Edie, and his last name is hyphenated, Moore-Ede. So Dr. Martin Moore Edie, he has written The Light Doctor. So go back to that interview. That's been about a year ago. And read both of their books. They're very interesting and challenge the narrative of how cancer starts and progresses and how to treat it. But I'm also going to tie in my mom's story of her battle with cancer and kind of use her as a case study and look at all of the things that I'm going to be talking about today and how they were so true in her life and how it just kind of set her up for a perfect storm of developing cancer. And I'm not claiming to have all the answers by far, no, but I do just think that we really need to go beyond looking at cancer as something that just happens to us and that, genetically we're predisposed to it and we're just kind of like, that's just what's going to happen to us and that we have no control over if it develops or not. And I think that is so false. So we'll look at a lot of different aspects today. And again, I don't claim to have all the answers, but I just challenge your way of thinking about cancer and feeling like you do definitely have a lot of control over whether or not this awful disease, happens in your lifetime or, claims the lives of those that you love and care about. And it's been very, this will be an emotionally charged episode for me as well. My mom just died a little over a year ago from complications of cancer and chemo treatments, all of that. So thanks for being here today. This is a very important episode. We're going to challenge the narrative today. What if cancer isn't just bad luck, but is actually a metabolic cry for help? And so we're going to look at this through a metabolic lens, cancer through a metabolic lens. And I also want to point out one of my favorite practitioners, Carrie Bennett. I'm really hoping to get her on my podcast soon. She is a quantum biology, circadian health teacher. One of the people that I probably learned the most from her, but she has a really great, I think it's available to the public. She has a really great cancer training, looking at it as a metabolic disease and a mitochondria breakdown. So her website is carriebwellness.com, and I believe that it is available there. I have it as a practitioner so I could better understand the metabolic breakdown associated with cancer as well. So like I said, we have this common belief that cancer just is due to our genetics or bad luck. And there's a bigger emerging view as cancer as a metabolic dysfunction and mitochondrial failure, oxidative damage. This is happening and starting at the cellular level, right? We don't just like, boom, all of a sudden a tumor appears out of nowhere one day, over the course of a day or a week. Like, this is something that is building and is severe metabolic dysfunction, and probably the most severe metabolic dysfunction that causes the cells so much oxidative damage and mitochondrial failure that they can no longer, go about their regular processes and replicate and duplicate themselves as that they should. So again, if you are a newer listener, my mom passed in February of 2024 after a pretty short, I would say a shorter battle with cancer. But she had fatty liver disease for many years prior to this. And I started going to visits with her in, I believe it was 2023, to a liver specialist in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and was not impressed at all. The lab work, nothing, they didn't look at her lifestyle, diet. They didn't even know anything about fructose, high fructose corn syrup contributing to fatty liver. It was really crazy. Basically, they were just saying it's something that happened and check your labs and we'll watch your labs. And there really aren't any medications for fatty liver. Because it's a chronic lifestyle issue, and you have to burn out the fat around the liver. And that takes some metabolic work and lifestyle work. It's very diet and lifestyle related. But my mom's fatty liver, I know she had elevated liver enzymes for at least 12 years. This is all we could look back in her medical chart. I'm sure it was probably even longer than that. So that would have been put her at 60-ish, that she had elevated liver enzymes. She died when she was 71. Her birthday was actually the next day. She would have been 72. But I imagine she had elevated liver enzymes even way before that. We just couldn't go back any further in her medical chart. And liver enzymes in labs that you might see that would be elevated are AST and ALT. Those are two markers. Fatty liver is more difficult to diagnose because you need a scan or an ultrasound to actually look at the liver organ to see if there's fatty tissue built up around it. There's not like one blood test that you can definitively say, yes, there is fatty liver here. Unlike where we see elevated blood sugar, we can say this person has type 2 diabetes. Fatty liver isn't quite the same, but it stems from the same issue. So even if, my mom wasn't manifesting her metabolic dysfunction as type 2 diabetes, she did have fatty liver for a very long time and was accumulating a large amount of fat around her liver and her organs. And after a while, fatty liver can progress to cirrhosis if you don't, reverse it. And she was not told how to reverse it. Again, no lifestyle changes where she wasn't told to make lifestyle changes. She wasn't told to decrease her carbohydrates and try to burn that sugar out of her liver. She was just told to watch it, and then it progressed to cirrhosis. And cirrhosis is basically scarring of the liver. And once you get this scarring, you can no longer reverse the disease process. So my mom was actually at the cirrhosis place when I started going to visits with her, and she felt pretty crappy by this point. Like, every time she would eat, she wouldn't feel very good. Likely so, because your liver is plays a huge role in digestion, especially fat digestion. So she wasn't feeling good when she would eat. She was getting like these red marks on her face, which is kind of a telltale sign of liver dysfunction, and just lethargic, tired, feeling off. And then about a year after I started going to visits with her, then she really didn't feel good. And by this point, I was trying to get her, to lower her carbohydrate intake, do some intermittent fasting to burn out that extra fat around her organs. But when you don't feel well, it's hard to follow through with those things. So she was kind of to that point where, she just wasn't feeling well. And I did get her some digestive enzymes, some ox bile, to help with her digestion, but she was, pretty advanced by this point. And a little more than a year after I knew that all of this was occurring, then she was diagnosed with her cancer diagnosis. And strangely enough, they diagnosed her with pancreatic cancer, but it had already metastasized to the liver and to her spine. So she had a spot on her spine and pancreatic and liver. How they could decipher that it started in the pancreas and not in the liver, I have no idea, but it was in the liver as well. And I knew right away, like, I know those digestive cancers are not good. There's so many glands that are around, so many, digestive juices and glands that are secreting. Anytime you have that type of cancer, the glandular cancers, those tend to progress a lot quicker and they are a lot more non-responsive to chemo. So I was like, Mom, let's do other things other than chemo. I wasn't in favor of chemo from the get-go, but I was made to feel really terrible about that. And her oncologist thought intermittent fasting was an absolutely terrible idea, even if it was just around her cancer treatments to, like, I wanted her to do some intermittent fasting around her chemo treatments to downregulate her healthy cells and upregulate the cancer cells. But of course, anyway, that's that's a story in and of itself. But just got no help whatsoever, metabolic help from the oncologist, from her cancer team. I mean, they were very much radiation, chemotherapy, that's it. You're going to die very quickly with if you don't follow through with these. So of course, my mom had been in the medical field. She was a nurse. She felt like she basically had to do chemo or else. And she did do the intermittent fasting protocols for the first treatment, but after that, she felt absolutely, it was like it just annihilated her. She felt so terrible after just one chemo treatment that everything went downhill very quickly. The other thing that really bothered me was that she got sent home, a bag of Boost or Ensure. I can't remember. I think it was Ensure. They're the same crappy supplements, just different companies, but full of sugar, full of seed oils, full of high fructose corn syrup, full of chemicals. And, given this big bag of sugar-filled supplements and coupons to buy more and told, like, drink as much of this as you can because, to keep your protein and your sugar up. But oh, it was just a chemical cocktail of nonsense. And so I at least got her some clean supplemental protein, but it's just everything was so backward. And I'll talk more about that a little bit more, but things like that, as we'll see, like seed oils and sugar, those are the very last things you want to be putting in your body if you have a cancer diagnosis. So just the fact that they sent her home with a huge bag of this shows you that the narrative and the treatments is so backward from, or so far off from, cancer being a metabolic disease. And basically you just got to cut this tumor out and annihilate it with chemo treatment, or that's it. Like, you can't shrink these by taking away its sugar source, or really trying to upregulate your metabolism and your mitochondria. Like, none of that is looked at as being viable options for cancer patients. So we have a long way to go. But now, like, I didn't know nearly what I know now about cancer and being about a metabolic disease and all the lighting and the grounding. And I didn't know any of that at the time of my mom's diagnosis. I wish that I did, and sunlight and how that plays a role. But now I do. And the reason why I wanted to kind of use her as a case study is because I can now, like, piece together, you know, how this all developed, and how, her story was really just I'm not surprised at all looking back now that she developed cancer and that she developed cancer when she did. So now I know, what the root causes of the metabolic breakdown is. I'm not gonna, I'm not saying like I know the cure of cancer or I know, how to absolutely, you know, never develop cancer. I'm not saying that. Please don't think that again that I am the expert on this, but I do know a lot about mitochondrial function and metabolism and how, how to optimize that. And looking at my mom's lifestyle, it was far, far from optimal. So my mom worked as a nurse from the time I was a baby until, I don't know, I think she retired in her 60s, mid 60s, maybe. So she worked about 40 years as a nurse. And I remember when I was a small child, she would work night shift a lot because my dad was on day shifts. My mom would work night shift. And that way one of them was home with us. So I remember my mom working all different shifts, but she did work night shift quite often. And I just remember her like her memory was terrible, obviously, because she didn't get good sleep. And she was on different shifts from week to week. It's not like she always worked night shift or she always worked first shift or always worked second shift. I remember by the time I got to high school, she was more of a day shift worker. She had a lot of longevity and had more daytime shifts, but she worked in labor and delivery. So as you can imagine, those are not daytime hours. People are having babies at all hours. She loved her job. She loved her job as a prenatal nurse and obstetrics. She was in that department pretty much her whole nursing career. I remember, people always telling me, "Oh, I had your mom as a nurse. I loved her. Like I'm so thankful for her." Like she was very good at what she did, but she did a lot of different shifts work. And so always trying to catch up on sleep. She would barely know who's coming and going some days and like a long stretch of nights. And then all of a sudden she's back to day shifts. Like her circadian rhythm was non-existent, right? Like I get it. Like I get people in the medical field who have to work shift work. It is very, very challenging. So she did a lot of shift work. And I know after I went to college for a short time, she worked in a clinic with was out of the hospital setting, was in a clinic. And that was a Monday through Friday, kind of, well, probably wasn't 40 hours. It was probably more like 50 hours, but in a clinic setting where she was, off on weekends and, home for dinner type of thing. But it was very, very fast paced and it wasn't labor and delivery. And she did not love it. So she only did that for a couple of years and then went back to the hospital and into the prenatal area that she so loved. But then you're going back to different shifts all the time. So there was definitely pros and cons. But another thing, so I know, my mom as a nurse, like she did not have a very good circadian rhythm because of the different shifts. But sometimes sleeping during the day. And then the other thing to think about, now is that there are tons of studies, and go listen to the episode with Dr. Moraidi or read his book called The Light Doctor. Tons and tons of studies that show that people who work shift work or who are exposed to artificial blue light at night after sunset have a much higher incidence of cancer. Certain cancers for sure that have been studied individually are reproductive cancers, but there's a link to all cancers, like having a higher incidence of cancer when you are exposed to a lot of blue light at night, as like shift workers are. Obviously, they're under very bright artificial light all night long. So that definitely came into play for my mother. Again, knew nothing about this until after she passed, but that book is very eye-opening and the studies are out there. I'm not making this up. I'm not just pulling these random, facts out of thin air. There is a lot of evidence that shows artificial blue light after sunset exposure increases your risk of reproductive cancers and other cancers. So there was that. And then another thing that I remember about my mom. So I'm sitting outside right now and my skin probably doesn't look all that dark, but I tan very easily. And I've always loved the sun. Like I was a lifeguard in my high school years and early college. I always go boating with my girlfriends. I worked at a beach. I love being in the sun. It makes me feel good. My skin tans very easily. I'll get I don't burn now like in Wisconsin because I know how to build my solar callus, but I remember, you get that first exposure, you get a little burn, but I would not burn after that. And my mom was one, she had very fair skin. I thankfully inherited darker skin from my dad and his family, but my mom was very fair skinned, burned very easily. Her whole family very fair skinned, burned very easily. And I remember her saying many, many times, like, I don't like the sun. The sun doesn't like me. I always get sunburned. And so she was in the sun very rarely. Like we had a boat, a little speedboat. I lived in a small town that had a chain of lakes, but that was very touristy in Wisconsin. And, I'd boat with my friends a lot, but my dad, like we had a small boat and he would take it out with us on the weekends sometimes. And sometimes it was just him and me and my sisters, or maybe some of our friends. Sometimes my mom would come along, sometimes not. But if she did, I just remember, her having a hat and covering up her skin and feeling like she was burning. So she did not get a lot of sun exposure. She did not spend a lot of time outside. Like totally different from me. I've always loved being outside, loved the sun, but she was one, she worked inside, she worked swing shifts and she did not like to go outside. I don't remember her doing like regular walking or any of that. Once I left the house and in my when I was older, I'd say the last 10 years, she was out in her retirement community walking her dog quite a bit. But before that, she did not spend a lot of time outside. There was, nobody knew about grounding. Um, I would say she very rarely saw sunrise because she was working such weird shifts and nobody knew to go outside and see sunrise with naked eyes. And I know she wore glasses later in life, but anyway, you can just see how this set her up for metabolic dysfunction. So very little sun exposure her whole life, shift work, working under bright artificial lighting at night, a high amount of circadian disruption, a very low daytime sun exposure. And then this, of course, she battled her weight her entire life that I never remember her being happy with her weight all but one time. I remember she was on fen-phen, if you remember that. It was like phentermine and fenfluramine, I think was what that stood for. And that like basically killed your appetite. But there were so many issues with it, people having heart attacks and heart palpitations and stroke, that it was taken off the market. But I do remember she was happy with her weight while on that, but then she had to discontinue it. So anyway, she's battled her weight her entire life. And then this fatty liver, I think, went on for decades. And now looking back, there were so many things that point to how her metabolic health got disrupted. And I remember like we were good eaters as a family. Like my mom came from a family of 9, my dad came from a family of 7. So there's tons of kids. My mom's family always had a huge garden. My grandma, who is still alive, she's 98, had a huge garden, made, food from scratch, bread from scratch. My mom was not exposed to ultra processed foods until much later in life. And even when I was a kid, we ate very little of that. Like I remember going and getting a farm share and having carob chips instead of chocolate chips. And, she did her best to feed us well. But after I left, I think it wasn't, she was eating a lot more at night, ice cream at night, that sort of thing. Not that she was a terrible eater by any means. My dad was, but my mom still tried and she still ate a lot of whole foods. But I think just that whole fat free, low fat, food, saturated fat is bad, butter's bad. Like that was so ingrained in her head that I think even much later on, when a lot of that was debunked, she still was just like, oh, I have to eat lean meats and vegetables and fat-free this. And um just I think a lot of it, like some of it was food related for her, but the vast majority was circadian disruption. So she definitely had, blue rich LED. So when I'm talking about artificial blue light at night, that's computer screens, overhead fluorescent lights, all of those things, she had a very high exposure. This has been shown, and there's again many, many studies on this, and it's in the Light Doctor. But blue rich LED and screen exposure lead to mitochondrial stress and oxidative damage. And the reason for this is basically, you have blue light is like I'm sitting outside right now. It's midday. There's a lot of blue light in my atmosphere. That is great. Like you are supposed to like look at blue light and take it in on your skin and those frequencies. But the problem is the blue light that's inside on screens, overhead lighting, there is no red or infrared light along with that blue light. And that red and infrared light's very healing, very it doesn't like have that strong cortisol wake up response that blue light has. And when you go outside, it's a spectrum of light all day from, daybreak to nightfall. There's a very wide spectrum of light happening where artificial blue light, it's one light frequency that's telling your body to produce cortisol, upregulate, blood sugar response is poorer. So all of these things strongly affect metabolic health. And so the near infrared and red light that's apparent outside, there's red and near infrared light happening from, sunrise to sunset. The near infrared light boosts mitochondrial health and cytochrome C oxidase, it's called. It boosts ATP production. It helps with water production inside the cell. And so I've talked about easy water or exclusion zone water. And that really helps to negate cancer causing cells and to get rid of all of that oxidative damage. It helps, cells just can't repair when you are lacking that red and near infrared light. So now we spend all of our time inside and we don't get that red and near infrared light. And the problem is a lot of times people like, oh, I work by a window, or I'm looking at the sunrise through my window. Sorry, but that's almost all the red and near infrared light is filtered by our window. So all of the good healing light frequencies are filtered by almost all windows in your car, in your house, in your workplace. Unless you have the window up and there's just a screen, screens will let almost all the light in. But if that's how you're living, that's how my mom was living, and how most of us live. And again, it's because we don't know any better. We spend 93% of our days inside if we're, and 7% outside if we're lucky. I think a lot of people spend far less. They're basically going into work, coming home from work, and walking into their workplace, walking out of their workplace, and that's all the time that they're spending outside. And so we're just setting ourselves up for all of this depletion in our cells, mitochondrial depletion. The other thing that I haven't talked about yet that is so important to understand is that when we are exposed to all of these artificial lights at night, and we have circadian disruption, we do not produce melatonin in our cells or in our brains, depending on when we're exposed. So melatonin is a master antioxidant that helps to get rid of an antioxidant that has repair effects and helps get rid of cancer cells and damaged cells in a process called apoptosis. So most people don't know this, 90% of melatonin is made in the mitochondria. We think of melatonin being produced in the brain by the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, which it is, but only a small amount, less than 10%. And that is secreted in response to darkness at night. But the vast majority of melatonin, which again is a master antioxidant that helps us get rid of damaged cancer cells and other cells that are damaged, is made by the mitochondria. This is made with near infrared exposure. So let that sink in for a moment. If we are not exposing ourselves to red light and near infrared light by going outside, getting sunlight on our skin, getting sunlight through our eyes, and red light and near infrared light can penetrate clothing and can penetrate um, deep into the body, where blue light and UV lights do not. Like UVB light is blocked by clothing, which is why you can't tan with or the most of it is anyway. But red and near infrared light can penetrate deeper and can penetrate through clothing. So if we are inside all the time, we are not getting this near infrared exposure. We are not making melatonin during the day in our mitochondria. And this removes that crucial antioxidant and repair effect. So important. I want you to just like go back and listen to that part again if you need to, because not only is melatonin secreted at night in response to darkness, this is not going to be secreted if you're staring at screens or aren't wearing blue light blocking glasses, because blue light will prevent that melatonin secretion from happening, but it's also happening in the mitochondria during the daytime in response to near infrared light exposure. That happens from being outside. So all these people, we've been told to stay away, stay out of the sun, stay inside, slather sunscreen on. And I'm not saying that, please don't think I'm telling you to go get sunburned. That's not what I'm saying. You can go out early in the day and late in the day when we don't have the intense lights, but the near infrared and the red light is still there. And we've been told to stay indoors and to be afraid of the sun and not go in the sun. And it has cost us. So, and sunscreen, again, sometimes like I use a mineral-based sun. I don't even know if I want to call it sunscreen. I haven't used it yet this year. I haven't had to, but if I was out on a boat all day long and I forgot a long sleeve shirt or something, I would use that. But sunscreen sends really mixed signals. It will you block some light frequencies, but not others, and it sends mixed, confusing messages to your body. But anyway, we need to think about melatonin production as being a prime way of getting rid of cancer cells and cells that are not functioning correctly. And that happens with near infrared light exposure. The other thing we want to think about is inflammatory diet. So there's cancer is multifactorial, but you can see how, our indoor lifestyles and our crappy diets and our, lack of light exposure of natural sunlight exposure, lack of grounding, all of these things just give us this perfect storm, circadian disruption of developing cancer. So seed oils and sugar also. So seed oils, if you don't know what those are highly processed oils that are in just about every ultra processed food. So the government doesn't want to admit that seed oils are inflammatory, but there's plenty of studies on those, and anything that is ultra processed, seed oils are ultra processed. I don't want to put those in my body. So Kate Shanahan has done a ton of research on seed oils, but I like to refer to them as the hateful eight, and they would be oils such as canola, sunflower, soybean, safflower, rapeseed. Gosh, I'm blanking on all of them. but probably the most common ones would be soybean canola oil. And these have been, oh, corn oil would be another one. Rice bran. And I think I'm just missing one that will probably pop into my head. Corn oil, soybean oil, and canola oil are probably the most common. And they're just this highly inflammatory processed fats that I used to promote as a registered dietitian and tell people to eat them, but they just how they are processed. There are many, they're hard to get for the body to get rid of, to utilize. If you get rid of seed oils, a lot of times just that alone promotes weight loss. It reduces inflammation in the body. But seed oils and sugar have been shown to increase reactive oxygen species, or ROS. We are all going to have some ROS in our bodies, right? Reactive oxygen species. I'm not saying it's all bad, but it increases it to a point where it's inflammatory and accelerates cellular damage. So this is where, that can be more promoting to cancer, because we don't want to damage the cells, right? We want them to function correctly. So once they start to misfunction, that's where the mitochondrial damage occurs, and that's what sets us up to then develop more cancerous cells that are not replicating correctly. So you can see how seed oils and sugar, by accelerating cellular damage, and then we're not producing melatonin as we should, this just sets us up for an increased risk of cancer. And then of course we look at the circadian disruption and vitamin D deficiency. So my mom, going back to my mom, night shift, indoor life, low vitamin D, because vitamin D, like a higher amount of vitamin D production and enough vitamin D in the body has been shown to help with immune function and cell regulation. So if we have low levels of vitamin D, it's almost always found in people with autoimmune disease. We have impaired immune surveillance and cell regulation. So we don't want that. So we want higher levels of vitamin D in our body. How do we get vitamin D? We get it with the sunlight midday, UVB light. You can only generate vitamin D when you have UVB light in the environment. So a lot of times people will go out right at daybreak or right at sunrise and think, oh, I'm getting my vitamin D. Nope, I'm sorry. You have to be out during UVB hours to generate vitamin D. And this is more, late morning to late afternoon, somewhere in there, depending on where you live, what time of year it is. I know for me, I'm in Wisconsin, and we don't have UVB light from November to February. So I couldn't generate vitamin D if I wanted to. If I was able to go out and expose my skin in Wisconsin at those times, which I can't because it's so cold, but I would not be able to even generate vitamin D because there's no UVB light in my environment. So that's why during the summer, vitamin D is a fat soluble, so it can be stored in your fat. So that's why, while it's summertime here in Wisconsin, I'm up and generating as much vitamin D as possible because my body will store it in my fat. And then when I don't have the light exposure in the winter, it will use up what I have stored. But vitamin D deficiency is also linked to cancer. So you could just see how all of these things work together. Okay, so now that you can understand all of those things and how, there's emerging evidence that cancer is a metabolic disease and not just random, it's not just genetic. That has been, I think the 1950s, maybe 60s, 70s, somewhere in there. It's been 50 years of inconclusive data that hasn't worked. Like cancer is, we have not made any progress when we treat it as a genetic disease that just happens. There's been no progress made. And again, I have my own personal thoughts, but I think it's criminal to give chemo treatments to people with glandular cancers. Again, that's just my own personal opinion. But I wish again, I can't go back in time, but if I knew now, if I knew then what I know now, I feel like I could have directed my mom a lot differently than I did. I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know eh, all of the circadian and light stuff that I know now. So I hope that you're just absorbing all this. Please, please, please pass this episode on if you know somebody who has cancer or you feel like should know about these things, because there's a lot that we can do. Okay, so let's talk about what we can do. We can improve our light hygiene, right? We can not be afraid of going out into the sun. Again, I am not promoting a sunburn. I know a lot of you are fair skinned and burn very easily. So that's where that morning sunlight, late afternoon sunlight, red light therapy, avoiding blue light at night. These are all things you can easily do, even if you sunburn or you burn very easily. Getting out in the morning when you don't have the more direct, I don't want to say harsh, but frequencies of light that do cause sunburn. So getting out there, using red light, like I haven't used I have a mini red light and I have a couple of red light panels in my house. I haven't used them all summer because I don't need to, because I'm outside all the time in the sun. Like I work outside all day if I can. And if it's too hot, I'm in the shade. I'm still getting benefits. My feet are on the ground. I'm still getting benefits of all the light frequencies in my eyes. I'm in the shade, but there's still sunlight that's penetrating my skin. You get the rebound effects of certain light frequencies. So there's a lot of benefit. If it's super hot out, if you live in Florida or Texas and you're like, oh my gosh, Shanna, it's 100 degrees right now, sit in the shade, go outside in the morning, go outside late in the afternoon, go outside and burst. You don't have to sit outside for an hour. Go outside for 2 minutes. Let the sun go on your skin. Let the sun get in your eyes. You can go out for sun breaks and not feel like you are going to be a sweaty mess by the time you go back in. So morning sunlight, red light therapy. I only use my red light therapy when I'm not able to get natural sunlight, and avoiding blue light at night. Everybody can do that. And if you are going to watch TV or use your phone or your computer, tap on some blue light blocking glasses. I know people laugh at them and they think they're crazy. And I just got back from Florida and we were flying at night both times. Like when we were coming back, our flight didn't leave Florida until 9 p.m. I had my blue light blocking glasses on in the airplane. And when we touched down and in the airport, I don't care. People want to laugh at me. I don't care. Everybody calls me Bono, like whatever. I don't care. Like I'm past the point of explaining and people thinking I'm crazy, but avoid the blue light at night. There is, I'm not just being weird. There is a method behind my madness. And then prioritize near infrared light. Spend time outdoors. Use red light devices. In the winter when you can't be outside as much. Make sure your circadian rhythm is strong. Like I've always been a morning person and gotten up early, but my circadian rhythm is stronger now than it has ever been. That means going to bed at the same time, getting up and at sunrise. Right now, the sunrise this morning was still at 5:17 a.m. I'm not getting up for that every day, but as soon as I am awake, I'm going outside, getting the sun frequencies in my eyes. And then when the sun is coming up later, first thing I do is go out and watch the sunrise. I do not put junk light in my eyes. I don't look at my phone screen before I go outside. I go straight outside. I don't care if it's raining or that's just what I do. Even if I can't go outside, if I'm somewhere, if I'm traveling, I'm popping a window open. I'm looking through a window with a screen. If I'm in the car, I'm rolling my window down. Like you can work around all of the, just about every scenario. Dim evenings are very important as well. I will do an episode at some point on shift work and how you can work around that, because I know that it's tough. I talked a lot about that in this episode. And I understand, like my mom is a prime example. Like they had to make it so that they weren't paying a fortune in childcare. So my dad worked days, my mom worked second shift or nights. And, it took its toll on her. But I know, like, there's medical people, there's all kinds of people who need to work second or third shifts. I get it. So I will do an episode on that. But as much as you can, dim nights, if at all possible, dim your lights, get circadian friendly light bulbs. My product recommendations are on my website. I'll link them here in the show notes. Dr. Moore Eady, his book, The Light Doctor, has all kinds of suggestions on how, if you can, it's hard to change the thought process of your workplace and get circadian friendly lighting in your workplace, but he goes through step by step in his book how to do that, especially if you are a medical worker or a shift worker. How to have more circadian friendly lighting while you're working so you don't disrupt your circadian rhythm so much. And then clean eating, avoiding seed oils and processed sugar. I know it's hard. I know it goes against the grain. And, I believe me, my kids, it's more difficult now. Both my boys drive, and it's funny, they work together during all summer. They work together and they love it. Like they like their jobs. They're outside most of the time, but they work at a company and they do work at people's houses. And they don't have access to a bathroom, right? So they have to stop at gas stations and that. So I know, like, it's there. They know my thoughts on it, but your kids get older and they're mobile and they have their own cars and they can go through the drive-through. I get it. Like, it's not always easy, but avoiding seed oils, which you avoid seed oils by avoiding ultra processed foods and eating at restaurants. Like, those places you have very little control over. Like, I ate out first night we got there, we didn't have groceries. I ate out in Florida and I had 2 big bumps on my neck by morning, and it's either from gluten exposure or something else used in restaurants. And that's the only time I get these bumps on my neck. They're almost gone now, but they're like right by, it's weird that I'll get them on one side or the other. And I don't know, it's either gluten or it's some other chemical that I'm exposed to, but the only time I ever get them is when I eat out, and then they're painful. They kind of look like a big, like, cystic acne, but they're on my neck. They're not acne. I don't know. It's very strange, but avoid seed oils and processed sugar, and then monitor markers that actually matter for cancer production later on. So vitamin D, look at your liver enzymes. If you think you have fatty liver, look at your metabolic markers, your blood sugar, your cholesterol level, I shouldn't say all cholesterol. Look at your triglyceride to HDL ratio. Those 2 markers should be close together. You don't want to have really high triglycerides and low HDL. You want to have higher HDL and low triglycerides. So look at those markers. Those are very strong metabolic markers. Look at your waist circumference. If you're over 35 for a woman or you're over 40 for a man, that is screaming metabolic disease. You're storing fat around those organs. Light, track your light intake. Take light breaks. Use my circadian app from Sarah Kleiner. It's called My Circadian app. It tells you all the light frequencies that I've talked about during this episode, where you live. So you put in where you live, tells you when sunrise is. It tells you when UVA is there, when UVB is there, when you can generate vitamin D, when is the sunset. Tells you all of these things all day. Tells you how much vitamin D you're generating depending on your latitude, how much clothing you're wearing. It's a really, really useful app, and it's free. So My Circadian app by Sarah Kleiner. These are all things that you can look at. And then if you have high blood sugars or you have circadian disruption, or you are so stressed that your blood sugars are off, you have high morning blood sugars due to stress response, get in one of my programs. Get in Low Insulin Academy. If it's more of type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, get into Cortisol Calm if you have high blood sugars in the morning due to your stress response. Like, you need to get these things under control so that they don't progress to something worse. So get into one of my programs. do an audit, have me do an audit for you. That's a new service that I just came out with. If you don't even know where to start, you're so confused about all of this, have me do an audit and I can direct you on next steps. So the audit, all you do is give me a 3 days of your lifestyle and fill out a wellness intake form, and I'll make you a video telling you exactly what my thoughts are and what you need to do next. So get an audit. There are new programs in the works, two of them, a leptin program, and then what to do if you feel stuck, like kind of an overview of all of the things that I talked about today. But there are things you can do, like take control. Don't feel like you're going to be a victim. Don't feel like just because cancer's in your family. Like my mom died of cancer. It was very traumatic to watch. And like I was with her every day for 30 days while she was in hospice and bedridden. It was absolutely awful. I saw what chemo did to her. And she didn't even tell me the extent of it, but I know she did not handle it well at all. It is absolutely awful to watch somebody suffer through. So don't feel like my mom died of cancer. I'm not sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have fatty liver and I'm going to develop cancer because my mom did. Like, no, like I know that if I keep my metabolic health, am I foolproof? Absolutely not. It could come and bite me just like it does, other certain people. And there are many other factors that I didn't even talk about today. Chemical exposure. We could argue the whole vaccine exposure, toxins, environmental toxins, water. There are a lot of things I didn't talk about today. Cancer is very multifactorial, but I don't want you to think just because somebody in your family got cancer and it just happened that you are going to get it too. So many things you can do. And I want you to have a deeper metabolic understanding and know that cancer prevention includes eating well, being active, going outside, but also getting your metabolic health under control, getting your light under control, getting your circadian stewardship, getting your circadian rhythm, stewarding your body the way God intended to. And it all comes back to, if we would just live how God intended us to live, we would see such a difference. So again, pass this along, get into one of my programs, get an audit. If you are struggling, I would highly suggest you take a next step and don't just sit on this, because my mom sat on it and it didn't end well. So there are so many things that you can do. Take control of your health, take control of your metabolic health. And of course, you can always get in touch with me on Instagram, send me a DM, send me an email, and we can discuss further. But I would love to see you in one of my programs and help you take back your metabolic health. With that, I'll see you again next week for another episode.